So there are A to Z things that are supposed to be done. So we put all these processes in place so that there was less confusion about what exactly are you supposed to do. And these ideas came from various NGOs and experts. So we kind of captured as much as possible.
Hello and welcome to the season 2 of Understanding the Future. I'm your host Punit Gandhi, and Climate Center for Cities is excited to bring to you a podcast about the future of work in the field of climate change, urban development, sustainability, and innovation. We will talk to experts working on ground as well as in the top management of government and non-governmental organizations to better understand how their field looks like in future. This will help us in preparing to enable climate actions as well as gauge the type of skill sets and jobs that would be required in future to solve complex challenges. If you are listening to it for the first time, do tune into season 1. Hello and welcome to the season 2 of Understanding the Future. I am your host Punit Gandhi, and today we have with us Mr. Raj Cherubal. He is the CEO of Chennai Smart Cities Limited, and he will help us understand about the urban water bodies restoration. Welcome to the show, Raj.
Hi, thanks.
So let's start our first question as one of the basic questions, especially for this topic. That is, what do we mean by urban water bodies, and what are we talking about before we talk about the restorations?
So I think this question comes up often, actually. Whenever I just talk to somebody and say, let's restore the water body. First question is, what water body? They don't realize that there are thousands and thousands of so-called water bodies in Chennai or in, I'm sure, many cities. Most of us only know Kuam River, which is used to be a proper river. For the last many decades, it's been basically full of sewage. So people like to make a joke out of it, how it stinks and whatnot. So everybody thinks Kuam restoration, because that's been a fantasy or a dream of people like me who grew up in Chennai. Anybody who grows up in Chennai wants to see the Kuam restored, because throughout the world you keep hearing about these stories of how Thames got restored or various other rivers got restored. But the thing is, even for me, it was a discovery process. Water body to me means anything and everything, especially because I'm not a water body expert. So from a citizen's point of view, it can be a pond, it can be a lake, it can be a marsh. And by the way, Chennai, southern Chennai used to have 5,000 hectares of marsh. Many of the famous institutions like IIT or my own house, I'm sure, is in some old marsh somewhere. And that's now, I think, it's come down to less than 1,000. So any such thing is a water body to me from a layman's point of view. And very importantly, many of these water bodies used to be and are still interconnected. Not all of them, obviously, because a lot have been encroached, and your house, my house, everybody's house and factories are sometimes on these water bodies and so on. So I wouldn't make any specific distinction about this water body versus that. I think all of them are required as a part of a larger system to ensure that we are environmentally friendly and we are capturing every drop of water that comes from the heavens.
Yeah. And absolutely, that's very important over here. And these are the only sources of fresh water that any city will have, or are there any other sources of fresh water for Chennai as well?
Depends on the city. In some places, there are rivers that flow through the city. Like I've always been mesmerized by Hooghly. Whenever I go to Calcutta, I go to Hooghly and just stand around and look at the size and the power of that river. It's a fresh water constantly flowing through the city. Chennai doesn't have those kinds of rivers, from what I understand. There's no big water source coming from somewhere. A lot of Chennai's water comes from the rains. And the rainwater is harvested and kept underground and overground. And of course, right now, because of the population explosion, we get water from various sources, from Andhra, from Karnataka, and of course, Viranam from the south of Chennai. And very importantly, increasingly through desalination. So there are those kinds of sources of water, but I think originally it used to be the actual ponds and lakes and temple ponds and so on.
Yeah. So traditionally, it was majorly the rain-fed bodies that helped Chennai sustain itself.
Yes, that's what I understand.
Okay. And how did the day zero problem came up, and what was the approach taken up to make sure that citizens still can get water?
So I think last floods was a big eye opener. Chennai have had floods before. Chennai has had droughts before. When we were kids, water was scarce. I mean, today, relatively speaking, water is available, which is surprising. But when we were kids, water shortage was it's a part of life. People standing, getting up early in the morning. My classmates getting up 3 o'clock in the morning and standing next to a pump to get a bucket of water, etc., was painful memories for a lot of people. So last floods was an eye opener, and I think it kind of made it obvious how much environmental destruction has happened, how many water bodies have been destroyed, how little we have done to preserve water, and so on. But interestingly, sometime back, maybe 15, 20 years ago, Tamil Nadu government did push very hard on the whole rainwater harvesting structures in buildings. That was a big achievement for the city. Every building supposed to have a structure and take as much rainwater into the ground and so on. But concerted effort to fix water body hadn't happened for a long time, and a lot of the development happening in the west and south of Chennai basically ate up a lot of these water bodies, and a lot of flooding basically happened because the water is supposed to flow from, let's say, point A to point B being in a lower area. And if you go build the factories and houses there, obviously water doesn't recognize, the plans have changed. So water continues to go towards those point B, which is, south of Chennai and so on. So the floods really, I think, completely opened people's mind and really put fear in our hearts. And also, very importantly, government, courts, everybody woke up, I think. Courts also came down heavily on encroachment. So the idea of water body need to be protected was always known, obviously, but it became a popular theme. And I must also say that Smart City, when we started the Smart City in 2016-17, not only we had done some piloting before that, and luckily we have the funds suddenly and the focus, right? The focus from the Tamil Nadu government and focus from the central government. All this thing came together to make this restoration project happen.
Yeah. And so I do feel over here that there are a couple of points that we can surely talk about. One is that you just mentioned about rainwater harvesting. One of the biggest challenge with urban areas in rainwater harvesting is how much of penetration is actually possible because of concrete. So were there anything also done around those lines?
So every building had these rainwater harvesting structures. So there are some very good organizations like the Rain Center in Chennai. They have really done amazing work on promoting rainwater harvesting and teaching people how to do it. And to a large extent, I think there was some enforcement pushing building owners and so on to put these structures. But last few years, we have gone very far in terms of putting wells and structures in various places. So, for example, in Tinagar, when we did roads, we knew that there were water puddling in various places, right? So we always planned to put these little bore rainwater harvesting people, and the residents told us, maybe why don't we do wells? Which means instead of puddling for a few hours, the water goes into the ground. So a lot of those kinds of structures were also put in various places. So that's one easy way to quickly handle the water puddling issue. You can take the water into the ground through these wells. So water harvesting in many different ways have been tried out in Chennai, including, for example, even when we do a temple tank, so that the water actually ends up in the aquifer, and of course, much as possible overground also.
Okay. That's fascinating to know. But with Chennai being a coastal city, won't there be a mixture of saltwater and freshwater then on those lines?
No, in fact, what I understand is that the saltwater issue comes when you, let's say, the water under the ground puts pressure and keeps the saltwater away. And when you extract too much water from the ground, the salt water starts seeping into the land side. And this is how the salt water starts intruding into the aquifer. So actually putting water and putting fresh water into the aquifer hopefully reverses the process. And rough numbers. Again, I don't have accurate numbers, but my colleagues have done some rough calculation with the available data. What we found is that for various reasons, not just because of water body restoration, massive, unbelievable amount of about almost 4 point some TMC has been increased underground, and about almost 0.8 TMC has been stored overground. This is our rough calculation, and how much of it is somebody needs to verify this, obviously. But based on the underground water increase data, we were able to come up with some rough numbers like this. So it's been a pretty massive savings in water because of the water body restoration.
Oh, great. If you can just let our audience know what TMC means, that'll be great.
Basically, see, 1 TMC is basically, somebody said 2.5 kilometers by 2.5 kilometers by 2.5 meter depth. That's imagine a box like that. That's 1 TMC water.
Okay. Oh wow, that's a huge quantity of water.
Yeah, check it out. Yeah. I mean,
surely we'll check it out, and we'll put it in the show notes as well, so that the audience can look at it. So with the smart cities, and what is the water body restoration project that you are working on?
Initially, we started off with about 62 water bodies. Different kinds of ponds and lakes were taken up, and using smart city money, it was restored. And then about 20, 30 temple tanks. And then the Greater Chennai Corporation, using its own funds and Tamil Nadu government funds, and CSR. There was Rotary, Care Earth, EFI, CREDI, which is the Builders Association. All of them also contributed, and together we were able to fix around some work is still going on, but most of it is restored, as in about 210 water bodies were taken up and restored. And I think around 60 temple tanks have been restored. So that's a big achievement for the city. And we won the Smart City Award last April.
Great, congratulations. So what is there a scientific process which is followed in restoring these water bodies?
Well, as scientific as possible, because see, ideally speaking, if you ask an expert or an academic, they'll say you have to map the entire city, and basically the water flows from the big lake to the small lake to the small pond to the small something else, and so on and so forth. There's a cascading effect, right? Depending on the contours of the city, this is how it's supposed to be. But the problem is, by the time we collect data, map, etc., time goes by and we get distracted. So sometimes in my, again, I'm not an expert, so I apologize if somebody disagrees with me. My approach is to say, look, let's restore whatever we can right away. That has various reasons. One, it is nothing to do with science, because it is more to do with our own way of thinking. That is, typically people, we started off, right now we are proudly claiming we restored water body and so on. So in the beginning, when we say water body restoration, people used to laugh at us, right? Because first of all, people are convinced that there's no water body in Chennai. And even if they knew there's a water body, the next question is, that's not possible. Then people are not good enough. Indians are not good enough. Chennai people are not good enough. Officials are not good enough. These are the typical excuses we come up with. And then they say, what's the point of wasting money and time? People are going to destroy it anyway. So no point going and doing these things anyway. So I think those were the issues. It wasn't like how to restore a water body. And believe it or not, there were a lot of difference of opinion, even among experts, on what exactly is restoration. Somebody will say, look, map the aquifer. You have to figure out what the aquifer is. But these are not very short-term things we can do in an Indian city, which is struggling to figure out where is a water body in the first place, right? Then there are these are practical problems. So your listeners may want to know this before they venture into their own city projects. So then,
Yeah.
for example, how do you know where is the water body in the first place? Some are very obvious. Sometimes people will be able to tell you, experts will be able to tell you, so and so place has a water body or 10 water bodies and so on. Sometimes, and I thank my friend Bala from City Connect. I used to joke that he's like Sherlock Holmes. He used to do detective work, go to these taluk offices, find the so-called FMB sketches and register data to see where is the water body in the first place, because there are records that say which is a water body and which is not. And sometimes the water body doesn't look like a water body. It basically looks like a land with a bunch of garbage or land with a lot of shrubs. In fact, one of the first water body I got involved with from my NGO called City Connect, along with EFI, which is Environment Foundation of India, was if I show you a before after picture, I in every seminar I ask, what is this? And most people think it's just a playground with a lot of garbage, but it turns out to be a 12 to 15 feet deep pond where the earlier, before the city it became part of the city, people had just dumped garbage and debris into it and just covered it up, right? So most of the time you won't even know that a water body is a water body. And most of the time, sometimes it's just full of sewage coming from all over the place. So you'll assume that it is just a sewage dump and it's always been like this. So finding out where is the water body in the first place itself was a major struggle. And of course, people do come forward and suddenly start helping. That's what I meant. It's more than scientific. It is a matter of building the public morale, our morale, your morale, everybody's morale, the scientists' morale, the NGO person's morale, to say, look, this is not like sending rocket to Neptune or Pluto or something. It is a simple problem. It can be solved. What is the lost water bodies? We have other solutions for that, but at least the ones you have, we can find it. And even though it's a painful process, it can be done. So that we overcame. Then the other thing is that, see, there's a lot of confusion on what to do once you find a water body, right? Do you dredge it? Do you put plants around it? What do you do? Right? There are a lot of legal issues also. So what we did was after that piloting, we put together a simple process. I mean, it's not simple, but still it's a process by which it said, no matter where the money came from, CSR, government, whatever it may be, you have to go find the water body. You have to find the FMB sketch. I don't know what FMB stands for, but it basically means it shows the boundary of the water body.
Okay.
So that's when you realize that sometimes you see it as something as an encroachment, need not be an encroachment. Sometimes things that are not obvious as an encroachment is an encroachment. So you clearly figure out, okay, what is the size and shape of the water body? Then either if you have scientific understanding of how to fix the water body, or you can go get a help. So we had a bunch of NGOs which were ready to help. So we connected these funders with them to say, okay, or consultancy. There are consultants who can do this for you. So they have to come back and say, these are the A to Z we should be doing on this water body. So typically the way I explain is, let's say in the worst case scenario, you have to do A to Z to a water body to restore it as water body. Sometimes you just have to do ABCD. You just have to take the little bit of garbage here and there lying around, a little bit of desilting, and the water body is fine. Some are in such bad shape that you have to do A to Z, right? Which I can rattle off quickly. Desilting, taking the silt and putting it into the bund and strengthening the bund, planting grass and shrubs, etc., to strengthen the bunds, planting trees, and if possible, if necessary and possible, you could add a little play area, benches for people to sit, so that public actually start coming there and looking at the water body. In many cases, you may have to stop the sewage in one way or the other. Sometimes you may have to divert it and connect it to the city's sewage network. Or you may just have to block it and let the encroacher worry about his sewage. Or you may want to do STP plant or what the constructed wetland to capture the sewage and recycle it and put the clean water into the water body. So there are A to Z things that are supposed to be done. So we put all these processes in place so that there was less confusion about what exactly are you supposed to do. So, and these ideas came from various NGOs and experts. So we kind of captured as much as possible. without making it so complicated that it becomes impossible. If you have to do mega surveys and mega this and that just to fix a water body, it'll never get anywhere. And we as people will continue to become cynical, and we'll say, it's all not worth the trouble. So anyway, we put that process in place, and we were able to move forward.
Okay, that sounds like a very sought out process right now, I guess. And I guess it has also come with putting it out across 210 water bodies and 60 temple tanks.
Yeah.
So coming to the other part, is how is now, as you have already mentioned, that NGOs have helped a lot as well, and other of organizations that have also helped a lot. So how is now the ownership of the people around the water bodies for the water bodies that is being seen wherever the water bodies have been, restored?
I don't want to exaggerate, but because some water bodies, the people around the water body was very excited and they were very helpful. They themselves took charge of it, and there's there are a lot of NGOs and people, RWAs and so on, which do amazing work in Chennai. They do take ownership of their water body in front of their house or factory. They start cleaning drives. They take children there to hang around and educate and so on. So a lot of that is happening. And I'm pretty sure there are many water bodies which have been restored, but it is just there. I mean, somebody's may not be going and taking a look at it all the time. But we have done our best, and we have a lot more to do, basically by bringing through social media and whatnot, trying to bring public to go and at least take a look at it once in a while. So, for example, we have something called a smart bike. It's a fairly popular thing in Chennai. So in the coming fitness campaign, for example, something we've been talking about for some time, let public take that smart bike. We'll tell you where the water bodies are. Go do a round of, like almost like a pilgrimage of water bodies and come back, Saturday, Sunday. So you mix fitness and public participation with the fact that, hey, this used to be a garbage dump. Now it's a beautiful water body. So I think spreading awareness, and subtly we've been able to do a lot of awareness through media, social media, when we win awards, and we put up a lot of posters around the city showing, water bodies have been restored. So right now I don't hear any more cynicism, at least that things can't be done. And now the new government has taken up water body restoration in a big way. So we are now trying to take it up to the next level and say, we're going to raise far more CSR funds and government funds for that matter, and try to take it. And I'm hoping that in the next few years, we fix every water body of Chennai.
That'll be amazing to see as well. So coming to the next point, so you have already mentioned the whole process of how do you restore a water body. Is there any operation and maintenance required once it is restored?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, once in a while, it needs to be desilted. And this is something the problems come in because there are different owners of water body. So some of it is corporation, some of it is PWD, some can be a tank, temple, and so on. So as much as possible, wherever it is corporation, obviously the zones have to desilt. And in some cases, we are asking the NGOs or corporates who help restore the water body to take up maintenance of it for the next few years and so on. And through the command and control center, etc., what we would like to do is put a proper system in place, so that without having to go all the way to the water body, you should be able to figure out either through people taking pictures and crowdsourcing, or we could be using drones. Every few days, drone goes and sits there and takes a picture and so on. So those are the things in the pipeline. But right now, as much as possible, we want the community to obviously keep an eye on their own water bodies, because it is their water body and not somebody else's.
No, absolutely. That's important. And I think that is where even the community engagement that it is already bringing around might be able to help in a better way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So any other challenge that is now foreseen, or any other technology that is now coming into picture, which is helping this do in a better way?
So right now, there's a lot of political interest. Politicians are very excited about this idea of fixing the water body. And I think they are obviously responding to their own vision and the needs, the vision of the public. So we have proposing that again through government or CSR money, doesn't matter, take up all the water bodies and make it into even more eco-friendly restoration with very little concrete, cement, and so on. Take it up and then set a target saying that every water body, including there's a Buckingham Canal, for example, that's basically a canal that comes from Andhra all the way to Kovalam. It used to be for, from what I understand, transporting rice and all from north to south. We are in the process of taking a 2 kilometer and fixing the two sides and making into urban forest and public space. People can hang around and sing or dance or just enjoy public space and so on. So imagine that kind of an approach to all the water bodies, all the banks of all the rivers of Chennai. And these are very simple, doable things, and it's already in the process. So we need to go further and think beyond just water body restoration, even though that's unbelievably important. To say, look, if you are walking, cycling, or in a wheelchair, right, you should be able to go from any water body to any water body. You should be able to cycle or in a wheelchair or walk or run along any of these rivers and then go to the Palikarne marsh, go around the water body without interacting with it, as in getting into the water body, obviously, because it's a protected area, but do bird watching. Then you should be able to go peacefully all the way to, let's say, the Velacheri lake, which is a massive lake. It's got its own problems. So there are encroachments, a lot of sewage coming in. But it's still a water body. It still can be restored. I don't see a big deal. And by the way, I forgot to mention, one of our crowning achievements will be the Villivakam tank in the north of Chennai. This used to be a massive sewage dump for the metro water. They have actually, helped us. The land was transferred to the corporation of Greater Chennai Corporation. In the last couple of years, that place has been completely transformed, and I'm hoping by October government can launch it. Where today, if you go, you'll most probably see pelicans and other birds landing in the water and nearby. We also hope to make that into a little bit of a entertainment place for public to come and hang out. But more importantly, from an environmental point of view, 2015 flood, because of lack of connectivity from one side for the water to go to the other side, the entire area was flooded very badly. I think it's called the Sitco Nagar. So right now, not only has the water body been restored, but also the connectivity, stormwater drain connectivity has been made so that water will flow from one side of the city to another side of the city to connect to various canals. And obviously, as much water gets stored in the tank itself. And I'm sure that will have tremendous positive impact for the public around that area.
I'm sure, because eventually this water is also going to cool down the city bringing down the heat of the city as well. And luckily, Chennai is on the coast and it has a large water body on its side, but this surely will add to it. So
by the way, and one more thing, and the commissioner of Chennai, he's actually taken up tree planting on a war footing. So we are getting NGOs, CSR, and public involved in a big way to plant thousands and thousands of trees as many places as possible. So in all these places, we are also looking at the possibility of planting native species, whether it is Miyawaki foresting or arboretum, urban gardens, nutrition gardens. So for example, the MS Swaminathan Foundation had this idea that there are poor people, pregnant women who don't have nutrition, children who don't have nutrition. These Nutri gardens could be both educational and, very importantly, access to food for the poor, which could be maintained by them and by NGOs and community. So along these rivers, we are in fact already started lots of Miyawaki forests, but we may also put in Nutri gardens and other kinds of forestry. We are inviting people to come up with ideas and creativity, so that it doesn't have to be a monotonous forest, but it can also be creative, educational, and obviously, ultimately, a forest.
Absolutely. This will all add up in a good way for the city as well.
Absolutely.
for its green cover, for everything in place. So what are your suggestions for the cities which are now struggling with this kind of, especially water bodies or lack of water as a challenge? What can they take up as the point of action?
So lack of water is a different problem. As in, see, there are experts who say that Chennai gets enough rains to store enough water for the entire population. I'm not an expert on that. Let's say if that is true, we should move towards obviously storing every drop of water underground and wherever possible, so that not a single drop goes into the ocean.
Yeah.
Let's assume that is not true. Let's assume only 70% is enough for quantity is enough and so on. There is always the whole issue of my hope would be that every city in India recycles every drop, whether for industrial use or there are enough technology now to make it so clean that you can drink any recycled water. And this is what Singapore is doing, from what I understand. So I think all those measures have to be taken. You have to use data to change people's behavior, like behavioral economics. That's, how do you make people use less water or waste less? There are many different ways of using data to make people aware and proactively change their behavior and make it better. So all that is there. But in terms of water body restoration, my simple theme is you have to get started somewhere. I mean, I think in India, we talk too much. We keep talking, and we keep talking about vision. We keep talking about ideas. We keep talking. We attend seminars, workshops, conferences, but unless you get your hands dirty by actually getting into the ground and doing something, we will keep talking. Because there's a reason I'm being a little bit harsh. See, I know it is intimidating, right? It's very intimidating. If you go stand in front of one of these water bodies, which doesn't even look like a water body, which looks like a garbage dump, which looks like a sewage dump or stinking with sewage, it is extremely intimidating. I know if somebody comes and tells you, hey, let's restore this, you may think that the guy is an idiot, right? What kind of a fool looks at a garbage dump and says, let's go restore it? So I know it's intimidating. But the point is, this is not a big deal. I mean, I always joke that if we were to take people of Chennai and send them to Mars or Jupiter, that's a big deal. We can't do that. We don't have the resources to do such things. But fixing a water body is not a big deal. It's been done for centuries. Mankind has done this, and womankind has done this throughout the world. So I think we need to start somewhere. And since various cities, including Chennai, have done something at least, you just have to at least try to copy the procedure, process, etc. There are NGOs which may have the know-how but may not have the resources. So you can put a coalition together. And very importantly, again, like I said, it's not the scientific or engineering that is the problem. It is the creating that network. It's very difficult to people to come together and say, okay, you know what, we'll focus on this one water body, let's fix it, learn from it, and try to replicate it. So I think a few people, especially young people, I think should take up this as a challenge to say, okay, we will restore one water body in the next 6 months. And there are enough NGOs and experts out there who can tell you how to do it. And don't aim for perfection. I mean, you can get so intimidated and frustrated by trying to achieve perfection, because N number of people will give you N number of ideas, right? So your job, if let's assume one of the listener is trying to now say, okay, let's try this. Your job is to build a consensus. If there are 10 experts, the idea is to say, okay, what is the consensus so that we can start something tomorrow morning, right? So build that consensus. Visit Chennai or any other city where there are many other cities which have done amazing work. Take a look at what has happened. Talk to those experts who made some of these things possible. And very importantly, get started. Get either government money, or there are enough CSR people out there willing to do. Now, of course, it's easy to do crowdsourcing. It's very easy to get the neighborhood people involved. So fix something, start somewhere, and that will boost the morale of the city and the people who are interested in these topics to say, you know what, if we can do one, we can do 100. And if you can do 100, you can do 1,000.
No, absolutely. That does make sense. That I think the first step is the most important step over here, and if that is
And
taken,
also, there's another very important, different way of looking at this problem, right? So
yeah,
I always tell people, see, I admire people who do, who plant one tree, who fix one water body, who does something, right? I
yeah,
have great admiration for them. But the way I think is, I like to think scalability. You
yeah,
have to decide that you're going to fix all the water bodies of your city. And the
yeah,
reason is this. Only when you start thinking the city scale. So, for example, Chennai has, depending on who you ask, about 88 million people or 10 million people.
yeah,
There are any city in India is a gigantic city, right? So
yeah,
you cannot think small. And I know it sounds pompous, but you have to think city scale. And the moment you say, I'm going to fix all, not I or you, the city is going to fix every water body of Chennai, every water body of Bangalore, and so on, the way you think becomes very different. It is not going to be you're going to go do this, or you're going to dig up the water body, you're going to plant a tree. It becomes, how do I put a network of people together, some with money, some with talent, some with ready to dig with their hands, or some bureaucrat who's willing to give permission.
yeah,
You'll start thinking very differently about the coalition that it takes to do these kinds of gigantic scale projects. So I
yeah.
would say you start somewhere, but with the idea that you're going to actually going to fix all the water bodies of your city in the next 3 years.
No, that sounds like a good thing that the audience can take up as well, and I guess they can visit the website of CSCL as well, where there's quite a lot of resources available on the same.
Sure,
Uh,
sure.
so one last question that we ask everyone is, what are the different skill sets required? And in this case, I will say restoring the water body as well as managing such a huge operation of doing it across the city.
Like I said, first, you have to build that coalition of people.
Yeah.
One, if it is done, let's assume it's done under the aegis of smart city, then smart city could take the responsibility to say, okay, I'm going to get a few NGOs, one or more NGOs involved, which know how to do water body restoration, and there are few in the country. Then you could call up CSR people and say, look, let's aim for 10 this year, or in the next few months, let's do 10. Here's the budgeting, and NGOs can give you a decent budget. So that is required. Then you may want to do some communication, right? So you may want to talk to the media. There are communication people who are very good at putting things together to say, you can do photoshopping. I know it sounds silly, but people are visual. We need to
Yeah.
see something to believe. So you could take a garbage dump and say, look, get a good architect to Photoshop and say, look, this is how the water body will end up looking in a few months from now. Why don't we do it? And the NGO can say, look, this is the kind of efforts it's going to take. A JCB or a lawn and more earth mover or whatever. I don't know. I'm not again, how many, this many spades and this many whatever to restore this water body. So I think people start seeing a plan in front of them. They start seeing what is possible. Many people will jump in and say, you know what, let's do it. Then you can, if others like us can give you the little bit of the know-how, then you can say, look, in your city, what are the natural species? There are NGOs which know what kind of trees are right for your city, for that particular location. Get them involved. So I think put a coalition together, and you may also say, sometimes people don't want to work with each other. So you may want to say, okay, you know what, let there be many coalitions. That's okay. You take care of that water body. This group will take care of that water body. The point is to restore water body, not to worry about who's willing to work with whom. But obviously, it has to be a consensus. And media, in my opinion, is very, very helpful. If you're going to do some good work, media always tries to help. I'm not a cynical guy. At least in Chennai's case, we've had nothing but help and cooperation, and to take the word and the ideas to the public. So all the newspapers and TV channels, etc., have been extremely helpful, because they are, after all, citizens of the city, and they also want to see things improve. So use the media and attract talent to your project, and manage people. You need to ensure that all those experts and everybody gets some credit, get some joy out of it. So you have to be careful to ensure that everybody is getting a credit and not just you. Everybody involved is getting some kind of recognition and so on. It's not an easy process, obviously, but it's not impossible.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. You have surely made sure that we have covered almost all aspects of it. If you have missed out on anything and you would like to take it up, I think this can be the last segment then.
I think so. One thing I can ask for is if there are hackathon type people, right, who want to solve some of these urban problems. So we have an innovation center in Chennai now, innovation hub. And what we're going to be doing is to throw data out there in public through a portal or something, and give people a list of challenges cities facing. So in this context of water body, here's something, and I can suggest: figure out how would you automate keeping an eye on the water body. So for example, there are satellite images every day, every minute, every few hours. Satellite keeps going on top of our head. There are drones possible. So imagine image processing, artificial intelligence to figure out if a square water body becomes a rectangle or a triangle, something bad is happening, right? Or good is happening. Or if there are drones which can land on the water, or IoT devices, or some other mechanism. I'm not, again, you can figure out how do you know somebody is putting sewage into the water? Instead of expecting a government official to visit the water body every day, or if you can't expect citizen to be constantly looking at the water body, obviously they have other things to do. So the question is, what are the practical ways to keep an eye on the water body so that if somebody messes with it, somebody is trying to do something bad with it, immediately the authorities are notified, immediately the public is notified, media gets notified, etc. So that there's tremendous pressure on every one of us, you and me, to ensure that nothing bad happens to the water body. So those kinds of issues, I think. Then, for example, the groundwater, right? Today, I'm purely guessing or doing some rough calculation on how much groundwater was saved because of this. Can we have ways of we have a command and control center. We have all kinds of this visual display across the city, 100 locations, right? So imagine if we can tell the public, hey, because of the last rain, so much meter of water went up, this much water was saved. And these are exciting things that public need to know in exciting ways. So the question is, how do we figure these things out without making it into a gigantic project? These are exciting challenges I think youngsters should look into and figure out how do we solve these, and in a very low cost manner, obviously, because funds are always at a premium. And how do you get public involved in a genuine way, right? Through social media and so on. What are the various ways where people feel compelled to go interact with the water, and that becomes part of their life and so on. So come and help us, and by helping us, I'm sure you will help every other city in India.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that if any queries come on our end as well for the same, we will pass it on to you so that such solutions can actually be implemented on ground as well. And we can start creating living labs.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Mr. Raj. This was surely a pleasure, and it was a lot of information that we took up in the short course of time. Thank you for sharing your experience and knowledge.
You have been listening to Understanding the Future podcast. To know more about Climate Center for Cities, check out our website www.niua.org/c-q. The show is conceptualized, produced and edited by Punit Gandhi, Senior Associate at CQ. You can now subscribe to our podcast on your favorite channel, which can be accessed through the credits. Also, don't forget to follow us on our social media for more updates. Do share your reviews with us and help us spread the podcast to your friends and colleagues. Do write to us if you would be interested in learning about any specific topics. Thank you, and stay tuned for our next episode.